Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Hi, everyone, and the show. What an exciting show we have today. We are sitting with Philip A. Greenberg. This is a gentleman that has reached the top 5% in his field of work. Philip is a legal matrimonial attorney, a super attorney, as they call him in the metro New York area. When somebody's reached this pinnacle of success, you want to listen, you want to pay attention, because we're going to learn a lot. Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Nice. So, Philip, when we begin the show, we always want to know, how did a person start? Because that start is very critical. And a lot of times the people that we interviewed, was it their passion? Was it the money? Was it somebody who kind of pushed them in the area? How did you get your start?
So that's a good question. And on that one, I don't know anyone who quite came into the law the way I did. I wanted to be an actor. I had a good singing voice until my voice changed. I was fat. I was funny. I wanted to be Jackie. This dates me, but I wanted to be like a Jackie Gleason. I always starred in school plays. And so when I started in the 7th grade, I was planning to be an actor, singer, comedian. But I was also, Abe Lincoln was my role model, and I was very interested in law. And of course, I enjoyed watching the TV shows about trial practice. And at the ripe old age of 12, it suddenly hit me. Since I want to go in Abe Lincoln's footsteps, and he wasn't an actor, and I would like to go into politics and be a statesman, I should be a lawyer. I was 12 years old, and can I call you Michael? Oh, can I call you Charles? By the way, Michael Smith is a lawyer I've worked with. I'm sorry about that. So can I call you Charles?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Charles, if you and I went to Brooklyn together, I could show you the exact spot where I was crossing the street on East 7th and Cordelia Road in Brooklyn when it suddenly hit me, you're not going to be an actor, you're going to be a lawyer. And I never looked back, Charles. There was a lot of reason. My mother always wanted me to be a doctor. My mother's family, most of my, you can't tell from my name, but I'm half French. And my French side of my family, most of my cousins became doctors and married doctors. So, and my mother, to the point of not only tried to move me over to medicine, but as I was going to my seat at my law school graduation at NYU, she came up to me and said, quote, "It's not too late. You can still be a doctor." So, but I didn't listen to others. Others said, "Oh, you should be a dentist. You should be a professor," whatever it was. And I never looked back. And so that's how I came to the legal profession. I had no idea. Money was not an issue. I came from a poor family. It's not that money wasn't an issue, but I really wasn't aware that lawyers can make a good living. I didn't come from a family as a matter of fact, there were no lawyers in my family. Even on my American side, there was one doctor. French side, there were loads of doctors. No lawyers. There have been some since I became a lawyer. And it was essentially, and again, we don't have time in a 30-minute interview, but then if we ever do a follow-up interview, I'll tell you how it happened that Abe Lincoln was my role model, because that is not an easy story either. I'm sure there are a zillion people who had George Washington, Abe Lincoln, whatever. They have all these role models. But how I came to Abe Lincoln also was not the typical path.
Got it. Well, let me ask you, Attorney Greenberg, what are some of the key factors that a person should look at when they are in need of a matrimonial lawyer?
Okay.
What are some of the things that they should consider?
That's a really, really good question. The most important thing, there's so many important things, but I think the most important thing is you should feel comfortable with this person. It's not
Mm,
like, you're buying a house, you spend a little time in a contract of sale, a title report, yada, yada, yada. In 60 days, you're done. Um, when you hire a divorce lawyer, especially if yours is going to be a contentious divorce, if there's issues of custody or heavy finances, you're going to be spending a lot of time talking with that lawyer on the phone, in person. These days of Zoom calls. So you should really feel comfortable with this person. Is this somebody that I really want to spend a lot of time talking and writing to for the next year or two, maybe longer? Especially in New York, divorces could take much. A contentious divorce could take much more than 2 years. So you've got to be comfortable. And the other thing, which is maybe equally important, is they have to share your philosophy. For example, let's say you're a father, and I represent a lot of men. I've, of course, represented women also. Let's say you're a father and you truly believe that you're the better of the two parents and you should have custody of the children. A lot of lawyers in the year 2023 still have a 1950s mindset and would
mm,
say to a man, well, I know more men are getting custody these days, but really the children belong with their mother. Um,
mm,
and if that's your lawyer's philosophy and your goal is to get custody or at least joint custody, then you probably have the wrong lawyer. And I go
mm,
on and on along those lines. I'll just give you one quick example. Years ago, I was on the Jackie Mason show. He had a celebrity audience, and I actually got a lot of calls as a result of being the matrimonial attorney on two of his shows. And someone called me and said her son, who's a doctor in Massachusetts, is getting divorced, and he wants to get custody of his children. And I'm not admitted in Massachusetts. I'm admitted in New York, New Jersey. But I had a counterpart firm in Massachusetts. So I called them and I spoke to the matrimonial attorney in that firm. And the first thing I said is, I got a call from a woman. Her son is a doctor. Before I finished the first sentence, the lawyer said to me, quote, "Oh, he's too busy to have custody because he's a doctor." So she was
mm.
definitely not the right person. And again, I don't want to make this a gender issue, but I can tell you that very often when the mother is a physician, the approach is a lot different. Oh, what a great role model for the children. She should have custody. Amazing. The rules change. So your lawyer has got to share your philosophy um,
Mm.
and your goals. And I don't mean that he or she should, well, there's no she here, I'm the he, that it doesn't mean that he is telling you what you want to hear or over promising. Because unfortunately, a lot of lawyers get cases, especially if it's a nice, juicy divorce case, where they tell the client what they want to hear. Oh, yeah, you're definitely going to get support. Or if, let's say, it's someone who's concerned about having to pay a lot of maintenance slash alimony, and they say, "Oh, don't worry, your wife used to be a teacher." Yeah, 25 years ago, and yeah, she's not going to get maintenance. And then at some point, the reality sets in, and really the lawyer just overpromised to get the case. So so on one hand you got to make sure that the lawyer shares your philosophy, but on the other hand you got to make sure he's not being a politician or a salesperson and just letting you hear what you want to hear. And the last thing I'll say about that, by the way, I'm like my wife. I always say it's the last thing and then I keep going. But the last thing I will say about that, Charles, is that I have had cases and clients initially call me, meet with me, I don't tell them what they want to hear. And for example, I had an example of a case where the wife, I was retained by the wife. I was shocked that she retained me because she made a lot more money than her husband and she didn't want to pay him support. And I said, there's no way you're not going to pay any support. The best we're going to do is it'll be a manageable amount and it won't be for too long. It was a long marriage. But that's the best. But you're going to wind up paying support. So I never thought I'd hear from her again. But sure enough, she called me. She said, Mr. Greenberg, I want to retain you. So I didn't tell her what she wanted to hear, but I told her the truth. And I told her how we could make the best of that truth. And sure enough, she wound up only paying in a like 30-plus-year marriage a couple of years of maintenance. In New York, it's called maintenance. In New Jersey, it's called alimony, and at a very manageable amount.
Right. Great. I want you to just back up a little
Sure.
bit because we're losing your mouth on the screen.
Oh,
We want
I'm
to be able to
sorry.
see you.
I'm sorry.
No problem. There you go. I didn't want to interrupt
No,
you, but no, in your 40 years experience, if
actually
anybody again,
49, but go ahead. But who's counting?
in your 50 years experience,
Okay. I just got a
let me ask you this
battlefield
question.
promotion. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. You've you've seen a lot of attorneys,
Mm-hmm.
lawyers, such
Yes.
a ton of experience. So if I'm a client and I'm looking for an attorney, what would you tell the audience are the best characteristics that you need to look for in a good lawyer?
Well, of course, as I already said, you should feel comfortable, and also he should share your philosophy. You've got to make sure he has the knowledge and the experience. You don't want
Hmm.
him learning on your case. And the fact that somebody like me has been practicing 49, you got me up to 50. Um, he may never have done. I can tell you this, Charles. When I was a young lawyer, I really hated to turn things away, not for the money, because I was an associate. I wasn't. I was getting paid a salary, but when you're a young lawyer, you feel like you want to and you can't do everything. I did immigration, you name it, intellectual property, just about any area of law you could think of. I normally would not turn the clients away. I'd bring in some experts to make sure I service them properly, but I wouldn't. Now, if someone calls me and says, "Oh, I need an immigration attorney," I look in my book. Oh, this one's good. They call me. I need an intellectual property attorney. I said, "This is a firm I've worked with before. I'll give you their information." So you definitely don't want your lawyer learning on your case. So if they have a unique issue, a unique custody, a unique financial issue, very complicated, finances, um, ask the question, have you ever had a case like this? Um,
Ah,
and if it's a young lawyer, maybe the answer is no, and maybe they're less expensive and whatever. But if it's a seasoned attorney, he says, well, yeah, I never really had to deal with that issue before. You really got to wonder, say, well, okay, then how can you handle this case? And they say, well, I haven't had a relocation case, but I've done 30. Relocation is connection with custody. I haven't done a relocation case, but I've done 30 custody cases, and really the issues are the same. The criteria in New York and New Jersey is the best interest of the child, whether it's a matter of a parent relocating or it's a matter of who should be the residential parent. And so if they can show you that they have relevant related experience, maybe they're still the right attorney. But sometimes they won't be, and you really want to question them. And I realize most. By the way, I've represented a lot of attorneys, Charles. So
oh, have
not all my clients, yeah, not all my clients are going to be non-lawyers, but most, of course, are laymen, and laymen vis-a-vis law. I mean, the doctors, they're not. You would consider them laymen, but they're laymen when it comes to the law. Um, And so, of course, it's not that easy. Just like it may not be that easy to choose a surgeon if you have no medical background.
Sure.
But you still have common sense. You have your own experience. You have your own philosophy, and you have to make sure that they're all in sync.
Right. You know, again, and I'm kind of hammering this one point
Sure.
home, um, and it's for the audience and people who, potentially go through divorce. What are some of the common, if you've had 50 cases or 100 cases,
Mhm.
what would you say some of the common cases are that come your way? Or is there a common case or
Well,
something that you've seen?
there's not a common case, but you certainly have a common stream. I would say
Hmm.
that, and again, we're not talking about the 2-year marriage, no children, renting an
Okay.
apartment, few assets, more or
Con-
less. They just realize it's not working out. And by the way, when someone like that comes to my office, I tell them get a younger, hungrier lawyer because you don't need an expensive, experienced divorce lawyer to handle, a 2-year childless marriage where both of you are self-supporting. I guess the common stream wouldn't be a specific issue, but that's that most clients have a certain agenda. Most clients have a thing that is one or two things that are most important to them. Maybe it's that they're going to have a relationship with their children after the divorce. Especially if you're talking about minor children, it may be that they want to have a financial life after their divorce. If it's a long marriage, let's say the person was the primary or sole support, he recognizes that based upon the law, he may have to pay support for a long time and at a pretty high amount. And so his goal is going to be he recognizes that there's going to be pain, but that the pain won't be so bad that he won't be able to really go on. I've heard people say, "Oh, now I can get on with my life. I finished my daughter just graduated from college, so after 10 years of child support, I don't have to support her anymore." And maybe you can't avoid that, but as I say, there's going to be there tends to be one or two common threads that are most important to a person. And look, some people are getting divorced because they want to marry somebody else. So
Right.
there, the common thread may not be financial, may not be custody. It'll be speed. I've got this guy warming up in the bullpen, and if this takes too long, he may join another team.
Right.
So a lot of times, for some people, speed is the most important part. Um,
Yeah.
so that's it. The common thread is that clients usually have one or two agendas, one or two points that are most important to them.
Yeah. You triggered something when you said team. I started thinking competitively,
Yeah,
and you're a competitor too. You don't
sure.
want to lose. So, um, I get people to ask me, what was your best game? What was your worst game? So I'm just going to ask you,
Uh-oh.
what was your most you can?
Wow. I don't get the easy ones. In fact, my wife always, I told you before that if an easy one comes in, I tell them to find a younger, hungrier lawyer, or I will find them a younger, hungrier lawyer. So my wife, one of her many complaints about me, by the way, I'm happily married, but
Right.
it's just part of being happily married. You still get a lot of complaints. So one of her biggest complaints about me is that I only take the hard cases. So
Mm,
I guess if I had to pull one out of the hundreds and hundreds of cases, it's a case you can look up. It's called Cross versus Cross. It was the couple was never went through a marriage ceremony. They had an 18-year relationship, one child. The woman, I'm going to call her the woman, called herself Mrs. Cross. And anyway, at some point he said, I'm moving out. I can't stand all this bickering, yada, yada, yada. And she said, oh, well, I'm going to divorce you and get you for every penny you've got. And I said, you can't divorce me. We're not married. And
Mm.
so she took the position, and if I stop boring you, just let me know. She took the position that they had a common law marriage. They lived in New York. And if you look up in the law books, you'll see that New York abolished common law marriage in 1933. So you say, well, where's she coming from here? This was in the 1980s. Where's she coming from 50 years after New York abolished common law marriage? However, New York, as with every state in this country, if you contract a common law marriage in one of those jurisdictions that still have common law marriage, your state will recognize it. So she took the position that when they went to Pennsylvania, when they went to Washington, D.C., they had contracted a common law marriage. So even though the case was tried in New York, it was tried under the
Mm.
Pennsylvania and D.C. law, and the case went up on appeal 4 times. I was the fourth attorney representing Mr. Cross. She had also changed lawyers several times. I'm always the last one, by the way, Charles. No matter how many lawyers are before me, I'm always the last one. So of course I was the last one. Case went up on appeal 4 times. It had already gone up on appeal 3 times before we had the trial. I had a 5-day trial against one of the top divorce lawyers in New York. In fact, he still is decades later one of the top divorce lawyers, and he won. The judge, Miriam Altman, ruled after a 5-day trial that they had contracted a common law marriage in D.C. or Pennsylvania. I appealed, and it's a very difficult appeal. If you know anything about appeals, 90% of the time you lose. And so it's a very difficult appeal. Appellate Division, First Department unanimously affirmed, excuse me, unanimously reversed and
Mm.
agreed with me that they did not have a common law marriage.
Wow.
And intellectually, it's not the only appeal I ever won, of course, but intellectually, it was the most satisfying win I ever had. This is 1988, because the judges wrote a long opinion, and the opinion was practically lifted from my brief. So
Wow.
intellectually, and the following year, the star of The Big Chill, I think his last name is Hurt, Jennings. It was a case called Jennings v. Hurt. It was actually televised, and the precedent that both sides argued was cross v. cross. In other words, Jennings' lawyers argued that this was different from cross v. cross. It was being tried in New York, and Hurt, the actor, um, argued that no, this is just like cross v. cross, and the lawyers from both sides were calling me to pick my brain. And when Justice Silberman wrote her decision, finding that there was not a common law marriage, the only precedent she relied on was cross v. cross.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
yeah, well, thank you. So it's a very, very tough case. I thought of writing a book about it. By the way, if I do survive to retirement, I do have a couple of books in my head, but Cross v. Cross is not one of them. In fact, if it was, I wouldn't have told you about it. I'd, make you wait for the book. Um, but there were twists and turns in that case that really probably would make a good book. It was the third, well, let us say my client had two ceremonial marriages, in other words, unquestionably legal marriages. She also had a ceremonial marriage, and there were twists and turns with that also. And again, maybe you will have to wait for the book to find out
Yeah.
what those twists and turns were.
Right. Well, clearly you have a competitive spirit, and I would say to your wife, that's why you're not retiring, because you're still competing and you want to win. So, another one question just for me along these lines: who is that one person that you don't have to say the name, but do you have somebody that when you go up against in court, you're like, all right, I got to be on my A game. This person is pretty good.
Yeah, I've been against a lot of pretty good people. I would say my adversary in that cross case, as I say, he's one of the was and still is one of the leading divorce lawyers in New York, and because I won't mention his name, one thing, Charles, and I know, well, I shouldn't speak for basketball players because I'm not really that much of a sports fan, but I would think that even the best basketball players, you might look at and say, you know what, I would have made that shot differently, or I would have played it differently. So, with this other lawyer in that 5-day trial, there are some things I would have done differently if I was him, but um, he was really, um, he was good at what he did. Thoroughly prepared. Of course, I was thoroughly prepared too, and ultimately convinced the lower court judge. But fortunately, I was able to convince the 5 judges at the appellate division otherwise. But I've had a lot. Can I have one other who I won't mention, but I think is a good quality for those of your people out there who are either looking for lawyers or want to become lawyers, is that one, there are a handful of lawyers, and I'm not sure I'm one of them, who they can get knocked down and they get right back up.
Yes.
And a lot of lawyers, if they get really knocked down by a judge, they don't really do a good job of getting back up. But I can think of a couple of adversaries of mine. They just kept coming at you. There's one lawyer we'll mention because he's deceased now, and he and I were very fond of each other. His name was Arnold Davis. And talk about people who never retired. My last case with him, he was 88 years old, had leukemia. He could barely walk, and but he had all his mobiles, and he used to tell me that the one thing he's glad he never did is he didn't retire. And he
Mm.
was a lawyer who always kept coming at you. He might make an argument in court and be totally off base and get totally creamed on it, and he would get back up and make a new argument, and maybe that one would work. He was never
True.
flustered. No matter how bad he lost on a point, he was never flustered. And that made
Awesome.
him a very difficult, even though he and I had tremendous respect for each other, it made him a very difficult adversary. He always had a one up you.
Yeah.
And sometimes he totally failed, but again, he would just shake it off and move on to something else, and maybe the next point would be the winner.
Well, that's a great story, and that's a testament to you because obviously, if you're going up against these people and they never quit, that says you never quit either. So that's a testament to you. You have a book on Amazon,
Yeah.
Force Insights.
Yes.
Tell the audience a little bit about that. If they grab it, what they can expect to read.
Yeah. So that's of course I recommend it. Oh, by the way, I have no financial interest. Part of the deal is that all the royalties go to charities. So I have
That's
no
funny.
I
Go
yeah,
for it.
yeah, I have no financial skin in the game. But it was a book. I wrote the first chapter. Uh, it wasn't my decision that my chapter would be first, but I'm glad it is. The Amazon put together a group of what they considered leading divorce professionals throughout the country. I think I'm the only New York lawyer who had a chapter. Each of us were assigned a chapter, and I covered a lot of the things that we've been talking about in the interview as to what to look for in a lawyer, the traps to try to avoid in divorce. Um, Kind of professionals you may have to hire besides lawyers, such as an accountant, maybe psychologist, depends on the issues in the case. And I think it's the last chapter. I haven't actually looked at my own book lately. I think the last chapter was written by a divorce professional who is not a divorce lawyer, but it was a psychological, specialized in counseling people who are going through divorce, and then also had
Mhm.
testified often as an expert witness. So it's really a great read. It's soft color. It's soft cover. It won't take you a long time to read it. I know it's still sold on Amazon. And especially for someone who's thinking about divorce or getting divorced or whatever, or just interested in divorce, which unfortunately touches everybody. Um, It's a good read. It's an easy read. You'll learn a lot from it. Um, and all the professionals in that book write in a very easy to understand way about the complications with divorce. So I recommend that book. And as I say, you can go on Amazon and buy it. I think it's about $18. As I say, I have no skin in the game. So, uh, but
Now you do the charity. It's going to a good cause, and
oh,
that's
100%. Oh, when I
yeah,
said I have no skin in the game, I shouldn't put it that way. I do have
yeah,
skin in the game. I
that's
want
awesome.
the charities to benefit. It's certainly good for the public. I know a lot of copies have been sold. It's good for the public because it provides them with an easy read on very complicated, difficult areas of life and of law. Um, and as I say, yeah, and of course the charities benefit also. So yeah, I do have skin in the game. I just don't have a financial interest in the game.
Attorney Philip A. Greenberg. What a competitor. I can ask you a zillion questions along those lines based on your career, your expertise, and what you've accomplished. This is coming to a close,
Sure.
unfortunately.
So
I literally can ask you a zillion more questions, but I want to give you an opportunity just to give a parting shot to the audience based on your knowledge, based on what you've done in your career. What do you want them to know that they didn't hear so far?
well, I think the most important thing is that a lawyer should be a every professional, but I have enough trouble speaking for lawyers. It should be a complete person. Um, Clients, unfortunately, they have their own problems. They don't want to hear your problems.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be on top of your game, you have to be physically and mentally on top. I'm 75 years old. I go to the gym 7 mornings a week. I was there this morning, of course.
Would
Um,
have never guessed. Would have never guessed.
yeah, no alcohol, no tobacco, no
Oh,
drugs, and no
awesome.
wild and wanton women. So
Wow.
I would say if there's anything is make sure that you have a lawyer who's physically and mentally strong and is going to focus on your problems, not on their own. Maybe it's selfish, but when
Awesome
you
advice.
hire a doctor, a lawyer, or a dentist, you got to be a little bit selfish.
Attorney Greenberg, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful show. Great insights. I learned a lot. I hope we can do this again.
Sure.
I want to tell you just to ask questions off the record, but it was a great interview. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Charles. You were a great interviewer. So
Thank you. All right.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.